Get started. I've got to read my little party piece here. Okay. Good morning. As chair of the tree committee, I'm declaring that an emergency exists, and I'm invoking the provisions of RSA 91-A:2, 3B. Federal, state, and local officials have determined that gatherings of 10 or more people pose a substantial risk to our community and its continuing efforts to combat the spread of COVID-19. In concurring with their determination, I also find that this meeting is imperative to the continued operation of town government and services, which are vital to public safety and confidence during this emergency. As such, this meeting will be conducted without a quorum of this body physically present in the same location. At this time, I also welcome members of the public accessing this meeting remotely. Even though this meeting is being conducted in a unique manner under unusual circumstances, the usual rules of conduct and decorum apply. And thank you for your patience. So we're going to start the meeting with a roll call. When each member states their name, please state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting. Why don't we start with Kevin and go across the top of the screen there.
Kevin Breen, there's nobody with me.
Okay. Eileen Flockhart, nobody here with me.
Sally's here, nobody's here with me.
Jay is here and no one's here with me.
Edward Twombly and no one's here with me.
Gwen English, no one's here with me.
Kristen Murphy, no one's here with me.
Greg Jordan, no one is here with me.
And Greg Beeson, no one's here with me.
Okay, I think we're good to go here. I suppose the first thing we need to do is take, if you've had a chance to look over the minutes from our last meeting, there was a fair amount of summary of the Arbor Day thing that we did at Lincoln Street School and some details on, continuing our application for Tree City or reapplication, which is what we'll need to do every year. And so if anybody found anything that needed a correction or an addition to the minutes, yeah, Sally.
I had just one minor thing and one more substantive thing. On page 2, under 3B, oh, and by the way, Gwen, these are excellent minutes. Thank you so much. A few lines down, there's a reference to Dave Short, and that should be Stratham Circle Nursery, not Stratham
yeah,
Hill.
You're right. Right.
And then the other thing, which is more substantive, is under 3C, there's a discussion of the flyer, and there's reference to the Facebook page. And there's actually 2 different places, social media places. Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that Kristen maintains the town website and Tree Committee has a place there, but not the Facebook page. Somebody else is maintaining the Facebook page. I'm not sure who that is. So the Facebook page should actually say town website.
That's correct.
Okay. And do we know who's maintaining the Facebook page?
I thought that a while back we had said that we would only do Facebook stuff through the Conservation Commission. Because I know initially Jen had done some Facebook stuff when we first were doing Tree City USA. And I think everything that's been shared since then has gone through Kristen and the Conservation Commission Facebook page. Am I right about that?
You're right in that I have shared stuff through the Conservation Commission page on behalf of the Tree Committee, but there is still a Tree Committee Facebook page out there.
Should we eliminate that or leave it or what?
Yeah, I would say unless we have a designated person who's going to maintain it, that we probably shouldn't have it. it gets confusing otherwise.
Well, let me get a hold of Jen Martell, who I think had initially set it up, and ask her if she could just, take it down or whatever you do to say, or forward it to, if you have any questions about Tree City, look to the Conservation Commission Tree Committee page. Why don't I see if I can do that, and we can.
Eileen, this is Bob, Exeter TV. If I could just add a quick little note, that since the town updated their social media policy as well, I believe all committee pages and stuff are supposed to have a town staff as the poster admin of the page. So that's another thing to look into with that.
Yeah, I think I did mention this to Jen a while back. And I think that's what we had agreed a couple of meetings ago, saying, that's the town policy and it should go through the supervision so that you don't have 14 different Facebook pages all flying around. And there is some control over it. So, yeah, I'm perfectly comfortable with having it work that way. So I'll check with Jen and see if we can eliminate that so that we don't have confusion. How we rewrite that in the minutes, I can't tell you. I think what we might want to do is just say, there's an adjustment to the prior Facebook page, which will be addressed soon. Anybody see anything else? And if we don't have any other additions or corrections, is there a motion to pass this as amended?
So moved.
And a second? Anybody want to, can I second it? I don't know.
Second.
Okay. I'd like to give you just a quick update on what's happening at Park Street Common, because I'd like to spend the bulk of this time working on the ordinance. I'd mentioned at the last meeting that several groups and organizations had kind of converged on a project at Park Street Common, removing some Unitil trees that have died, planting some memorial trees for neighbors in the area who had recently died, and a fundraising campaign to sort of put it all together. And so I'm happy to tell you that all those things are happening. We're close to within $200, $250 of the money we need to do trees and engraved stones and the whole bit. The stones have been selected and I'm dropping them off this afternoon to be engraved. Jay is checking with DigSafe to get approval for the locations, and Jay and Greg and I have looked at the spots where the trees are going to go, and it looks good. Families have picked out their trees, and we've tagged the trees at Stratham Circle Nursery, and Parks and Rec is going to give us tree diapers for the trees. And we're hoping that we'll be able to do the planting the last few days of September, depending on whichever day is best in terms of weather. And that we might even be able to have a small celebration with families and neighbors, outside in the fresh air with masks on. So that's our plan for that. And I have yet to get a hold of the newspaper, but I think either leading up to this or in addition to, a lead up story, some coverage for the actual event is something that I'm hoping to get. And then we may be able to do another similar video, Bob, if we're able to get that kind of coverage to add to the Lincoln Street School tree planting that Natasha did such a great job on. So that's where things stand. And it's been, and the families whose family members are being memorialized by the trees were thrilled and very touched by the whole effort. So it's one of those things that makes you feel like when you go to that Park Street Common, families and the kids and everybody will say, oh, look, there's Joe's tree, there's Denny's tree, there's Joanna's tree. And so everybody's, it's kind of a nice feel good thing in a time that's not always feeling so good. So it's keeping me sane anyhow. So that's where we are with that. And if anybody had any questions, feel free to send them my way. But okay, I'll keep you posted, and maybe we can post something on our tree committee page to update the actual date when we decide, and so that people are aware of it. We probably don't want to notice the public too much in advance, because we ran into that with Lincoln Street School. If you say, oh, we're going to have this lovely celebration, and then you have 150 people show up, and I don't want to create that problem either. So you have to kind of walk on eggshells a little bit about how you let people know that something's happening. So I think any prior publication will be a date to be determined, and then we can kind of leave people hanging and not, create a policing problem or something. So, but I will let people know so that if you're able to stop by before or after and want to see the trees, we'd love to have everybody do that. So now we get into the meat and potatoes of today's effort. And I guess one of the things that when I read, the amount of stuff that's out there and the job that we're really looking to accomplish, since our ordinance or regs or whatever you call them is fairly sketchy, we're really looking to start from ground zero. And I don't think we're ready to create a very complex framework, but I would like to limit our tree ordinance to just focus on street trees and park trees, and find a way to say, okay, we're going to create some guidelines around that, and that we should, as recommended by a number of people, that you have two separate documents. One is an ordinance with a real kind of vision for what the tree effort is going to be, and the other is standards and specifications that goes into the nuts and bolts. The tree ordinance is something that has to be approved. The standards and specifications can be a little more flexible, from what I understand, so that maybe that's where our wiggle room is when we go to do it, and that we really need to have some sort of a vision and a goal for what the ordinance is. And I don't know whether you begin with a vision or you do a bunch of things and you work your way back to the vision, and also defining responsibility for the ordinance. I think Sarah had mentioned this before, that one of the most difficult things when they deal with different towns is knowing who makes the decision, who's in charge, who do we have to get permission from to do something. And so I think that needs to be part of what we're doing. But I just like to throw it out to you folks for ideas from the readings that you've done, and what you found that was good, and what you think would be helpful for us going forward. Anybody can jump in.
I have the least background in any of this, but just from the reading, I thought Jen's beginning of having goals and figuring out how specific we want to be, because some were like down to, I don't know, the Hartford ordinance had 2-inch trees, and they had actually a circumference around which the you had tree responsibility. So I looked into New Hampshire's tree size, and when do you need the permission of the landowner to do anything to a tree on the side of the road? If it's dangerous, you can just do it, but if it's not dangerous, then you need the permission. If it's 15 inches, 4 feet above the ground, I mean, that's how specific it got. And I think we have to identify which trees we're talking about, or the size does have to come in there at some point. It's sort of within the parameters of how do you define a shade tree, and what trees are we going to be responsible for? So that may be something in all of this to consider, but it does almost have to go down to that specific.
So this is Kristen. I can add a couple of my thoughts and goals on this. It seems to me that we're talking a town ordinance, not a zoning ordinance. So I just want to confirm that.
Yeah.
But I do think that we need to be mindful that we do have staff that can make some of the judgment calls. So some of the ordinances seemed very onerous in terms of decisions on individual trees need to come back to the full committee. And so my recommendation is whatever these goals are clearly defined so that we're not having to go through that process, and staff understand the expectations and goals and can work within that without bringing every decision back to the full committee.
I think that's a good point. I've read of towns that have shade tree commissions, and Portsmouth may be one of them. But I think if we just stick to street trees and park trees, and at this point, stay away from how we monitor private trees that may, edge their way onto public issues or something. But then because of that point I made about having somebody in, whether it's Jay or whoever, to say, okay, this is how the ordinance reads, this is what our specifications are, and I'll help you, work your way through it, because we want to see this as supportive in the town of encouraging trees to be planted, trees to be cared for. I mean, I look at the trees on Lincoln Street, and I wish that I could go out and buy tree diapers for every one of them and have put them on those trees last year. But if there's a way to say, okay, here's an example. If you're going to plant a new tree in town, you must have a tree diaper on it. All right. And if it doesn't have a tree diaper, then the whole committee isn't the one to supervise that. One person or two people could be the ones to say, we noticed that there's no tree diaper and you have 1 week to get it on there. They cost, the best ones, the big ones cost $40. That's cheap to save a tree. But that's just an example. And I agree with you, Kristen. You don't want every time something has to happen to come back to a committee, because that's deadly.
I mean, one of the things that struck me when I was reading this is the stress that all of these articles put on community involvement and community buy-in.
Yeah.
And I think your example of the Park Street Common project is a perfect one to kind of highlight the importance of this, because it seems that everyone in that neighborhood is fully on board and excited about the planting of new trees. So I think that's something we're going to have to somehow encourage going forward. We're going to have to really get the word out there that we're working on something like this and get the buy-in from the public. And the other thing that, and I didn't see this mentioned, but in a few places, but it did talk about the involvement of town staff and probably select board members, everybody who could potentially have a part to play in this, and getting the financial, not only the emotional support, for lack of a better way to put it, but to also get the financial backing, because if we are going to be needing tree diapers, if we are going to need to treat trees because they're diseased, if we're going to need to cut them down. I know, Jay, you can probably add to this, but I know there is a budget, but if we're going to put in some guidelines that need to be followed through on, we just need to make sure we have the money to support that. And it does seem to me that the goals, in this one page that I copied, it talks about the tree ordinance encouraging tree planting, tree maintenance to secure the beautification, the cooling, the purification, noise abatement, property value enhancement, wildlife habitat, and public health and safety benefits. Those are all things that trees support. So I can't quite tell how specific we need to be in the goals, but I think that's something that we perhaps should work on first and try to just establish what it is that we see going forward for our town. And, do we want a certain amount of tree canopy? Do we want to encourage more tree planting? What is it that we see our town, how do we envision our town in the years ahead? That's my 2 cents worth for the moment.
I agree with, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I just, focusing on the goals, I agree that that's a good place to start. And I thought, Gwen, you mentioned planting of trees and maintenance of trees, and I would add to that, I think those are goals that we want to specify in the tree ordinance. And I think a place to start is to think about our tree inventory. We have some information on the trees that already exist, but I think we want to have as a goal updating that tree inventory for all of the trees that are on public land and in parks as a place to start, not private, but just the public.
Yeah.
And we talked about having an intern do that. So maybe one goal would be to annually have an intern work on a tree inventory. I think the issue in terms of the goal of education, perhaps this doesn't belong in the tree ordinance, but we should have a document somewhere to inform, help private property owners understand the benefit to them as well as to the town of planting trees. So that's because the ordinance should focus on public. But I think it would be useful to have information readily available to residents in the town about the importance of trees and the value that it adds to their property and to the town. Yeah.
I agree. I agree with Gwen that I think right now we're more in a reactionary mode with all the weather issues we've been having with these windstorms. I mean, just this week I've already gone out and assessed 7, I believe, trees, and residents do have a fear of a lot of the old growth trees. They see any wind damage, they want the tree. First reaction is to cut it down, and it takes time to talk them off the edge. We prune and do everything we can to save the trees. But having said that, when we do lose a lot of them, I think it's important to try to replace them as fast as we can. If the owner is engaged at that time, that's the time to engage them to replant in the same area. But again, it's just time and funding to do so. So right now, I'm more in reactionary mode most of the time versus the proactive mode of going out, trying to find more locations and putting in new trees.
Jay, it would be interesting to have some data for us, but also for the public about how many trees the town would normally lose in a year, whether it's storm damage or other issues, so that we have a sense of the scope of stuff. When trees were cut along Lincoln Street driveway there, 25, 30 trees. I think the public doesn't have any clue that even happened, or the impact of how long it takes to replace a tree that, had a, circumference of, sizable old tree. And knowing that, coupled with, let's say, a tree inventory, knowing that data to say, all right, in order to maintain the canopy that we have, we need to do this. In order to improve the canopy that we have in our town, we need to do that much more. And, how do we go about doing that? I think most people don't have a sense of that. They may notice a tree, a tree here or there that all of a sudden used to be green and now it's dead. People occasionally will notice that if it's right on the street. But I think for the most part, folks don't know. So the negative and the positive information could be useful.
I agree. We haven't, except for the tree inventory that we did, just because of the time and just it's by myself pretty much doing this with the contractors and in-house staff, and the amount of calls that we get. It's not so much the takedowns, it's calming the people's nerves and doing whatever we need to do to trim the canopy, to clean out dead wood and things like that. But certainly a goal to do in the future. Lincoln Street has been brought up a few times, and that was a major project that I learned a lot from reviewing those plans. We had a landscape architect on staff, on the engineering staff, that picked out those trees. And I think that we all learned that the tree diapers could have been added in the contract, and there could have been more inspection when the contractor was planting them. I think I shared with you, Eileen, that I went out myself and I tagged, can't remember the exact amount, but more than 2/3 of them that are going to have issues. Now, some of those don't look too bad. However, if you look down at the root base, they still have ratchet straps in the ground sticking out. That it's not going to, the tree's going to die eventually. And I think the trees down at the end by the church that have all died, those were the wrong species to put down there, in my opinion. But learning from that moving forward with future projects, large-scale projects similar to the Salem Street project we're going to be doing, we're going to be a lot more I'm going to be a lot more proactive in that process and not rely so much on the consultants. The Lincoln Street project was not per se my project, and I'm going to be more proactive in all the projects from now on for the street trees. Mm-hmm. So that could be a correctable action, just requiring that initially in the contract. Those, by the way, are going to be replaced, supposedly, with a warranty this fall. I haven't heard yet which ones. I tagged quite a few. But I have not heard back of exactly what's going to be replaced and what's going to happen with the ones with the ratchet straps still in the bases of them wrapped around them.
Jay, what were the ratchet straps for? I saw one of those outside of Burnham's, and I was like, I couldn't figure out what they were even there for.
Neither could I, other than hold the root ball together. I'm baffled by it. I've never seen it before.
I thought maybe a kid had parked their bike next to the tree, but it was down in the soil.
In the ground, yeah, they're coming out of the ground, and I don't have a clue. No idea why they would do something like that. I've never seen it before.
So, Jay, I have a question following up on the comments you just made, which is who is making the decision about which trees are going to be replaced and what they're going to be replaced with?
The landscape architect that the consultant hired. I think Jen worked on that project.
Yeah, I think she did.
Yeah.
So that would be a goal to, whenever there's a project like that, as you say, to make sure that there's town input and town involvement in what those decisions are.
More of a personal goal for me to get more involved in it. I did review the plans. I put my notes on the plans of some of the ones that I objected to, but overall it was approved to go through, and it looked nice in the beginning, but a lot of them didn't survive. And
yeah.
I think there should have been some community outreach there. To try to get the community, the residents to water. I don't think there was really a watering plan in place for the contractor.
Can we put in diapers now?
Excuse me?
Can we put in diapers now?
They're dead. The trees are dead. The ones that...
No, I mean the other ones that are not dead, that are still extremely dry.
I think the few good ones, yeah, they could. They could, but it's difficult right now to I don't know what the contractor is going to do, but I will make it a point to talk to engineering and find out where that all lies and what's happening. Because if we put in or touch any of the trees at this point, then we own them, the contractor, they're not warranted anymore.
Right.
Okay.
But I think going forward in terms of, okay, if our tree ordinance is aiming to deal with street trees and park trees, and there's a big project or a small project that is going to plant trees on a town street, then we need to have some guidelines that say you must do this and this and this. And end of story. If you can't comply with that, then this is not a contract that we would like to go forward with. We have to look for somebody else. If there's a way to jointly work on something, we'll say, if you have this contract, the town will help you do something. I think of the trees out in front of Great Bay Kids Company, those are good statements of what we're doing for street trees. If a contract is determined that you will maintain these, but they don't, and then, oh, well, what do we do? I don't know. So I'm guessing, I was sort of hoping AJ was going to be here, but I'm guessing that if we work toward, kind of the vision that we have for what we want to do, we don't have to have every little piece of something, all our ducks in a row. This certainly sounds like the climate for, going to the select board with the town ordinance and asking them to look at it. I think they've got enough on their plate. And I think if we say to Tree City USA, we're working on this, this is where we are so far, and down the road, we'll get select board approval for something. But, my gut feeling, and I could be wrong, but my gut feeling is that if we show the effort like we're doing now to put something down, get some parameters, try to figure out what it is we really want to accomplish, and set that forth to Tree City USA, I would think they would be pleased to see that we're going in that direction and that we don't have to have a polished project, ready for December 31st. Kristen?
Yeah, I just want to restate what Sarah said at the last meeting, and that's Exeter was approved as a tree city based on what we have currently in our regulations. So there really is no rush to get something new in place. It's worth taking the time and getting it right. To me, it's been really helpful to hear some of the needs that Jay has, and maybe it would be helpful to hear Greg's as well, to see how can this board support the staff and where are there areas that they need that help.
Yeah. And I think Tree City USA would be pleased with that kind of cooperative effort. Greg, I know you said last meeting that you thought given improved conditions that there might be the availability of an intern to do a tree survey for next summer, perhaps. Is that something we could cross our fingers for?
Yeah, it is possible, and I'll look into that a little bit more. But if you could sort of develop how much of a commitment it might be, a summer-long commitment or a couple weeks, maybe a little job description, that would be helpful.
Yeah, we might have something similar from the one that was done in 2017. I thought it was a 2-month effort, but I'm not positive. Jay, do you remember?
I believe it was 7 weeks. However, due to COVID, that part-time position has been eliminated now, and there is a hiring freeze. So I don't think there are any funds available for next year to do anything.
So we need a gift of an intern.
We might be able to come through with a gift because we have some grant funds for interns, and if that's one of the projects that the intern works on, even if it's a partial inventory, perhaps, not a 7-week commitment, or maybe a 2 to 4 week commitment, and then they go on to other projects, that might work for our intern. Yeah.
All right. If you can look into that, and we can kind of keep our fingers crossed, and who can know what next year is going to bring? I have no idea.
I think go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I cut you off. You go. I'll follow up.
I think the most important thing is not so much as the intern that we need right now. Is I could use support when looking at these projects, or I think sign off somebody like Greg or myself, or even AJ, if I could get help when these projects are being done, and even on the planning side through Kristen, somebody sign off to say the specs for these projects. It's not really a big deal to add them. I don't think the contractors or the bidders will balk at them. It's just they got missed. They weren't put in. Lincoln Street, it was not put in. And the the species that were put in on Lincoln Street, some of those, Dave Short and myself reviewed that. We added our comments, and it didn't go anywhere. So I think that, with Dave's experience and mine, that they probably should have went along with a more hardy species down there that would have stood a better chance. But if I had some help in that area, I think it would be huge to me.
So what would that help? First of all, I think that's a perfect example of why we need a tree ordinance.
Exactly.
And second, until we have a firm tree ordinance in place, Jay, how can we support you? Because I think you're absolutely spot on in terms of the mistakes that if you want to put it that way, that were made in the tree planting on Lincoln Street, and it's just not. It's not a good example, and the town, people in the town who walk up Lincoln Street say, "What's going on with all these trees that have died? All this money went into this project," and it's just, we want to avoid that in the future. So how do we do that? How do we help you on that?
I think part of the ordinance should be that the town's tree warden and perhaps, to make it more arbitrary, second opinion, AJ or Greg or someone with me look at that. It's not really that time consuming to make sure that nothing was missed in these plans.
Yeah.
on these major projects. I attended a consultant meeting for the Oak and Salem Street project, and at first presentation there was, there's a need for some sidewalks down Oak and Salem, and the first thing out of the consultant was, we're going to have to remove all these trees. And I said, oh, no, we'll look. And I think we can make accommodations and we can get around that. And I've also told them that any pruning will be done by the town, through the town, that needs to be done. But in a lot of these big projects, they shortest distance between 2 points, and it's cheapest, and that's the way the contractor does it. And that a lot of that can be avoided. It's just time, and but that's the kind of help I'm talking about. More support. It's just me. If I have the ability to call AJ and I know, Greg, you time is limited, but if I could lean on you a little bit, or AJ, for looking at some plans that I don't quite agree with. It may weigh a little bit more, with more than just my red pen on the plans, because it seems a lot of times my red pen on the plans doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
I think AJ and I would both be happy to help. We're both definitely non-regulatory figures,
Right.
so
Same as me.
Yeah, so we can certainly offer opinions and technical assistance and advice. I guess the ultimate decision falls on, Jay or Selectmen or DPW, whoever's, or Planning Board. But it won't be AJ or I who are forcing the hand on a project. Right. And I fully agree. I just think that more than just myself making the recommendations, and on Lincoln, I actually tapped Dave Short, and he was a great help, and we banged heads. We spent a lot of time on that, and it didn't really seem to go anywhere. We sent our recommendations, and I don't have the regulatory authority either, but I think the more the better.
Yeah.
That could offer that. And if the four of us or three of us concur on something, I think that maybe the design engineer would take it a little bit more seriously and listen to the input.
I know that for the Lincoln Street project, they had, sort of a public charrette, and I went, and I think Jen was there presenting stuff for her firm, and I had a lot of questions about some of these trees that seemed. There was a Kentucky coffee tree. It was not native to here, and maybe was this and that. But I did ask for the list of trees, and they were sent to me, and I went through all of them. But I was just one person in the public, and they were glad that I was interested. But beyond that, I don't think they pulled any one particular species of tree because I objected. But they were willing to give information. But, then had I known what I realize now, I would have, asked for more information about how are these going to be maintained.
Right.
I heard that there was a contract. If they don't survive, they have to be replaced. But to me, if you plant a kid in the ground and the kid dies, you just go get another kid. No, if you plant a tree that costs a couple of $100 and it doesn't survive, you just get another one. Oh, well, it just sounds like a bad way to run a business, let alone plant a tree. But
that's typically how they do contracts. One of my notes on there was, and this is from my own experience, that those folks, as we all pay a lot in taxes, they want this street beautiful and they don't like the construction. And really all it takes is a knock on the door and a chat about what we want to do with the project. And I have had overwhelming success with people saying, I'll take care of it. I'll watch it. I'll water it. It's more of an education for that matter. And the people that are calling about the trees are the ones that own the houses where they're planted in front of, because they were never really informed. They knew of the project. They knew what was going in there, but they assumed that it was going to be watered, taken care of by the town. I'm getting calls now, when are we going to come up and cut the grass? Because it's never been explained to them. And I believe Greg has been getting those same phone calls that the town, we're not landscapers in that sense, and we cannot possibly do the medians. The town right of way in front of my own house, I cut when I cut my lawn, but those conversations have never taken place. And I think more going door to door and talking with folks, we can get a lot more. I mean, most people in this community are wonderful.
Yeah.
I just have a comment to make, and this was from a conversation that I had with Jen, and this is back to the Lincoln Street school trees. But she commented on being on site when the trees were being planted, and basically, from what she was saying, it sounds like the people who plant them really don't know anything about planting trees. They may be the guys that are putting in the sidewalks. They may be, who knows what their majority of their job is focusing on, but it's certainly not the planting of trees. And I have no reason not to believe her. And if that is indeed the case, is there anything that we can do to prevent that from happening every time a contractor is involved and is putting in street trees?
Yes.
It's awkward for you, Jay, to be hovering over their shoulders saying, hey, that's not how you plant a tree. But how would you see that being resolved so that these poor trees that are going in the ground are being planted properly and have a fair chance at survival? I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think it could be addressed, Gwen, in the contract documents. In fairness to Jen, she did try.
I think she did.
Out there. She was out there. Yeah. But at the time they came in, it was a landscape company from Massachusetts. I forgot the name. They were probably the cheapest. They were a sub under the contractor. And they came in and they were going so fast. There's no way she could keep up with them and inspect everything. They had so many people in there, and she was critiquing them and finding issues, but they would go a million miles an hour and try to fix it to make her happy, and they hit a lot. And I'm sure she did not see those ratchet straps. So I think it's just in the documents, and when it comes time to do that, maybe some more help, for the consultant, because she did the best she possibly could with the situation out there. So
that's her project, and she has a lot of time and energy invested in that and wants it to look good.
Right.
So I can't point fingers at. I think she did the best she could.
She did, but
it's just the getting it done properly when it comes to putting the trees in the ground is pretty important. And I don't know how we can make that better. But thank you for
Yeah, I think it goes back to the contract documents, because again, Jen has to work within the contract too, and she can't put requirements on the sub that are not in the contract. So it goes back to that, and I think in the beginning, if it was reviewed with more scrutiny by more people, and it was spelled out, clear. I mean, you would assume you wouldn't have to do that, but believe me, you do. So,
who approves the contractors for projects that involve street trees?
Well, the town engineers, the town engineering staff, which is Paul Velocich and Jen Mates, they approve the general contractor. The consultant does the background check. They approve the general contractor, low bidder, and they're supposed to, at the time, supply a list of subs. And sometimes they don't always have all the subs on board yet, so those get amended later on. But they approve the contract as written by the consultants. And the consultants do have landscape architects either on staff or subs in their RFP when they give their proposals to the town, if it requires one.
Hey Jay, this is Kevin Breen. I would be happy to help you with some of this. This is what I do every day. I manage landscape construction crews. In the last 10 years, I've been involved with it and battling current building practices and then plant health down the line, because they are just planted improperly, usually in the wrong materials, just because of the environment they're in. It's usually not tree species or the architect. There's a lot involved, but I find it starts with the contractor with the excavator day one, knowing this tree needs to be planted in some decent material. And if he or she knows from day one, moving forward, you're going to have a lot more success. But this is what I work on all day long, plans and then collections of trees at properties that are failing years down the road. And I have a lot of data to support you moving forward.
Thank you. I would very much appreciate that. And as an example, as you know, conditions on plans, they could change rapidly, as you know, and we all know. Lincoln Street School, for instance, the tree that we put there, we started digging, and we thought it was reasonably fair soil, and we hit a building. It was all bricks. So we had to over excavate by 3 times the depth and refill with the proper soil and to get the tree to survive. So that would be a great help. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I spec out over excavation on all of my projects for the last 4 years and have had fantastic success, because how can you grow a tree in the sidewalk? Because it's compacted gravel underneath it. Underneath the sidewalk, underneath the road. I mean, you don't have a chance. So just from day one, those conversations of boots with boots on the ground to he or she running the excavator is crucial, very crucial.
Thank you. I agree.
Maybe it would make sense, Kevin, if you and Jay kind of drafted some standards. So this ordinance could then tier to some standards. I think once as long as there's standardized stuff that you know works well based on your experience, it just becomes a part of the contract in the early process or a part of the site plans. And Jay, if it's something that involves planning at all, the planning department, if you have comments on tree species or anything that you see there that you feel needs to be changed, I would definitely encourage you to include Dave and I on that, and we could help make sure that it makes the plans, at least those plans that are going through the planning department.
Great, thank you. I think that's a good idea. Right now we have standard specifications for construction in the town of Exeter, as you know, but it does not include anything for tree planting. There's no part in that. So that would be great.
Yeah.
Well, ultimately, this is what the tree ordinance should be dovetailing into, I think, is just the addressing these issues that you're just having this whole conversation about. If you had something already, like Kristen says, in the standards and specs, then they would just say, oh, it has to pass this too. Right. And somebody in the tree committee would be saying, is it fulfilling what the tree committee says these contracts need to at least look at?
Right.
So that's a good point for us to think about when we do the ordinance.
Right. Yes, Kevin, thank you. I would like to talk sometime. I think you have my contact information.
I do. I'll reach out today. Absolutely. And I see it. I look at engineered plans all the time, every day almost. And all of the specifications call for proper planting techniques. They're usually spelled out on those documents, but the majority of the time they're not followed. So there is a lot of information that can hold contractors, hold them, liable, it's already there. It's already spelled out. So it's how can we support the people that need the support to just enforce that and say, this is actually not according to the spec that you're going to be, paid on and we agreed on. So a forefront conversation with trees in mind for the town of Exeter is with contractors would be very helpful for them.
Great. I agree.
And then in addition to, here's an example of what could be in standards and specifications, is that document, or however we look at it, needs to be available to the general public, whether it's on a website or whatever. So if somebody wants to go forward with something, it's there. And not just the contractors know what's expected, but, the folks who, whose house is in front of where a tree is being planted or being trimmed or taken down, whatever, that there's a better system of communication and education about what we would hope for. I know that AJ had said something about maybe sitting in on one of the Portsmouth Town Tree Committee meetings that they have, because they started out, years back with a small group, probably not unlike this, and have grown into something that's created. And they have an inventory of every tree in the city of Portsmouth, and they've added all those trees to the kind of back entrance into the city, and they've done some amazing work. So they may be able to give us a little more guidance as we go forward with this. But I think we've got some ideas here, and maybe we want to sort of shoot for our next meeting to say, if you could come up with sort of a vision statement for a goal, what would it be? And, and then if you were to look at, some of these other ordinances had a list of, trees that fell into, good categories, they had different categories of trees that would be good for planting, tree species to avoid, so that we have, I think Dave Sharples had given us the Summersworth tree ordinance, and they had a similar sheet, a list of, trees that were useful, the trees that were, don't even think about planting that tree, and, everything in between. So if we could sort of, I'd like to kind of start with a vision of what we hope this can do. And then, working our way down from there to say, okay, here's another piece of an idea, and here's another piece of an idea, and here's another piece from whatever we're able to read or talk about or talk to each other. I think because it's something that's evolving here with us. And, as Kristen was saying, we don't necessarily have to prove anything to Tree City at this point. We just need to keep working on what we're working on. And maybe there's also a way to involve some more TV stuff, whether it's the Park Street Common, but maybe it's something else about, tree education, and, or, a piece on what does a tree diaper do? And could we come up with another name for tree diaper besides tree diaper? A tree hug? Give that tree a hug? I don't know. But anyhow, just informational, educational kinds of things that is, as Gwen or Sally was saying, it just kind of pulls people in and gets them interested and says, oh, I didn't know you were doing that. That's great. Or I'm worried about this tree. How can we help? And also, I did say I'd like to stick to an hour, and I don't want to, push anybody over the edge here. So can we sort of pick a time I'm thinking the tree planting at the common is probably not going to happen till maybe September 25th or the following week, 29th or 30th, somewhere in there. But maybe we could meet again on the 24th of September. That's a Thursday. Thursday seems to be our day. I don't know. Does it work for X number of folks here? What does Thursday, the 24th of September look like for everybody?
I have the same conflict that I would have had today.
Oh, yeah.
Maternity leave didn't cancel the meeting.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
For that, always for the third Thursday. Fourth Thursday.
Yeah, it actually would be the fourth one. Yeah.
How about Wednesday? That work?
Wednesday could work.
Works for me.
Works for me.
Wednesday the 23rd?
Works for me.
I think we love Wednesday the 23rd. Does that sound good?
Yep.
At 8:30?
8:30, Wednesday the 23rd. I'm putting it in my calendar. I have one of those paper calendars on my desk here. You're probably all putting it in your phone, right?
Here we are.
So, Eileen, my thought is that and just to make sure I'm on the same page with you, is that we're independently going to kind of put together some goals that we see as viable and worthwhile goals to work toward, and then maybe we can just all share those at the next meeting. So that I think
it's a start. I think I don't know whether we're able to communicate those by email. If we do that, does that constitute a meeting, Kristen?
Okay.
So you're just sharing your individual drafts to each other so that we could come to the meeting prepared? Yeah, I think that's fine.
Just a list of things that
I think we could come up, if you were to say, okay, here's the mission statement or the goal for a tree ordinance for the town. Think less is better, think of something as concise as possible. Maybe there's some others that we can look at that other towns have used. But basically that gets the gut feeling across, and then know that anything beyond that, can be more specific to other, issues around trees all over the place. Suppose we did, if everybody thought about coming up with, a couple of sentences, a paragraph or whatever that says what you're thinking, could be a goal or a vision. Mm-hmm. And then, maybe you can email them to me and I will forward them to everybody to look at. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
Do we want to have a deadline?
Yeah, I need a deadline.
I do too.
Sally.
I need help. Suppose we say, if we're going to meet on the 23rd, suppose we say by, September 9th or 10th, that second week in September, throw something together and get it to me. That'll give me time to send it back out, and we can all kind of look at what everybody sent and get the best of everything.
I could probably do it by the 11th. Would that be okay?
Yes, the 11th is fine. Anyway, sometime in that second week of September.
Okay. I'm away until the 8th. So
yeah, you're allowed to the 11th. That's perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, unless anybody has anything else that's jumping out at you, I think we can call it good and I thank everybody for some really, I'm always amazed when I sit here and I go, I don't know too much, but, all of a sudden people join and, share stuff. And I think, oh God, this is great. Kevin and Greg and Jay and Kristen and Deb and, everybody kind of, a lot of heads are a really nice mixture, and I'm learning a lot. So I thank you all. And so we'll see you on the 23rd, Wednesday the 23rd, and I'll hear from you somewhere